Hello everyone, welcome back to Xbox Nation. Today we're diving deep into Kenna Bridge of Spirits, a game that captured hearts when it launched as a PlayStation exclusive back in 2021. After 3 years, it's finally available on Xbox consoles, opening up this beautifully crafted world to a whole new audience. But how does it hold up after all of this time? Is it still worth your time and money? We'll cover everything from story to gameplay, performance, and so much more in this detailed review. So, what are our thoughts on this gorgeous AA game? Let's find out. Let's kick things off with the story. Kenna Bridge of Spirits puts you in the shoes of its protagonist Kenna, a spirit guide on a mission to help troubled spirits find their peace. The game begins with Kenna arriving at a village consumed by corruption, where spirits of the dead are unable to move due to unresolved traumas. The main narrative revolves around Kenna's journey to the mountain shrine, where she must cleanse the corruption and help these lost souls. The story is told through a mix of in-game cutscenes, dialogue, and environmental storytelling. Ember Labs, the developers behind this game, have done a commendable job of creating a narrative that is both heartfelt and emotionally resonant. You'll encounter various spirits with their own backstories, each one adding a layer of depth to this entire world. These stories often touch on themes of loss, grief, and redemption, making for some genuinely touching moments. However, as engaging as all these individual stories can be, the overarching plot does have its shortcomings. Kenna herself, while likeable, doesn't have much in the way of character development. She's a somewhat static protagonist, and her journey doesn't involve much personal growth or introspection. Additionally, the story as a whole is quite predictable. If you're familiar with the genre, you'll likely see many of the plot twists coming from a mile away. That being said, the predictability doesn't necessarily detract from the enjoyment, as the story is still very well told, and the world is rich with lore. Another point worth mentioning is the game's pacing. Kenna Bridge of Spirits is a relatively short game, with the main story taking about 10 to 12 hours to complete. This works in the game's favour, as it does avoid dragging out the narrative longer than necessary. However, it also does mean that some story arcs do feel a bit rushed, particularly towards the endgame. A bit more time spent on character development and world building could have elevated the narrative experience even further. Moving on to the gameplay, Kenna Bridge of Spirits is a classic action-adventure title with a wide linear design that harkens back to the days of the older Zelda games. If you're an Xbox player jumping into Kenna for the first time, you can expect a game that sticks closely to genre conventions, but executes them with a level of polish that's hard to ignore. The combat in Kenna is one of its strongest aspects. It's a mix of melee and range attacks, with Kenna wielding a staff that can transform into a bow. As you progress through the game, you'll unlock new abilities, allowing for more dynamic and varied combat encounters. You'll also have access to your rot companions, which are tiny adorable creatures that can assist you in battle. These little guys can distract enemies, clear corruption during fights, and even power up Kenna's attacks. One thing that does stand out about the combat though is its challenge. Don't let the game's charming visuals fool you, as Kenna Bridge of Spirits can be quite difficult, especially during boss battles. The difficulty spikes are quite noticeable, and some fights will require you to master the game's mechanics and be very quick on your feet. The game doesn't offer a lot of hand-holding, which might be a pleasant surprise for those of you who really do enjoy that challenge. I found that playing the game on the easiest difficulty does negate these problems, so if you're looking to just enjoy the story, then this will be the avenue that I recommend. However, the combat in this game isn't without its flaws. The biggest issue is the somewhat stiff movement and controls. Dodging, attacking, and even basic actions like jumping can feel a bit clunky at times, which can lead to a bit of frustration, especially in more intense battles. The camera can also be a bit unwieldy, particularly in enclosed spaces, which does add another layer to the difficulty of combat. Now, exploration in Kenna is also a significant part of the gameplay. The world is divided into several large semi-open world arenas, each with its own unique environment and set of challenges. These areas are filled with hidden paths, collectibles, and puzzles that do reward you with various different upgrades, cosmetics, and new rock companions. The puzzles in the game are genuinely very well designed, though they tend to be on the simpler side of the scale. Most puzzles involve you using your rot to manipulate objects, clear obstacles, or activate mechanisms. While these puzzles won't test your brain power too much, they're still quite enjoyable and do offer a nice break outside of the combat. The sense of discovery as you explore and uncover secrets is one of the game's highlights, even if it's not as deep or complex as some other games in this genre. That being said, exploration is slightly hampered by the same movement issues that affected combat. Jumping, double jumping and climbing can sometimes feel imprecise, leading to moments of frustration when trying to reach certain areas or complete platforming scenarios. These movement quirks don't ruin the overall experience, but they do make certain parts of the game less smooth than they could have been. When it comes to progression, Kenna Bridge of Spirits keeps things fairly simple. You'll earn currency by completing quests and exploring, which you can spend on upgrading your abilities or unlocking new ones. There is also a cosmetic aspect to the game with various hats and outfits for your rock companions that you can collect and customize. However, one of the game's weaknesses is its somewhat shallow progression system. While the upgrades you unlock are useful, the system does lack some depth and variety. There aren't many meaningful choices to make, and by the end of the game, you might find yourself wishing for more options to tweak and customize your playstyle. This lack of depth in progression can make the game feel a bit static, especially during longer play sessions. Now, let's talk about performance, which is a very mixed bag. Visually, Kenna Bridge of Spirits is a masterpiece. The art style is vibrant and colourful, with so many lush environments and beautifully animated characters. Ember Labs' background in animation shines through in every single aspect of this game, from the fluidity of the character movements to the expressive faces of the rock creatures. It's clear that a lot of love and care went into this visual design, and the result is a game that is an absolute joy to look at. On the Xbox Series X, the game runs well for the most part, but there are some technical hiccups. I did encounter occasional frame drops, particularly in more graphically intensive areas or during hectic combat sequences. While these drops aren't severe enough to break the game, they were noticeable and can be a bit distracting, especially if you're someone who values smooth performance. You do get two performance modes on the Xbox Series X version, either favouring the performance, so it's an upscaled 4K at 60 FPS, or you do get a quality mode, which targets native 4K, but the frame rate hovers around the 30 FPS mark. It is worth noting that I didn't encounter any of these issues when I was playing the game back on PS5 in 2021, although some players did report similar problems across all platforms. It does seem that these performance issues have carried over to the Xbox version, which is slightly disappointing. However, hopefully Ember Labs will address these problems with future patches. Another aspect to consider is the loading times, which are genuinely very quick across the Xbox Series X and S, thanks to the SSD. Fast travel between the areas is absolutely seamless, and restarting after a death is almost instantaneous. This helps maintain the game's pacing and minimizes downtime, which is always a plus for this game. Before we wrap up, I want to touch on the audio and sound design, which does play a crucial role in bringing this game to life. The game's soundtrack is composed by Jason Gallaty, who is best known for his work on the fan-made Zelda album Time's End. The music in Kenna is absolutely beautiful, perfectly complementing the game's emotional tone and vibrant environments. From the serene melodies that play as you explore the world to the more intense tracks during combat, the soundtrack adds to a lot of the overall experience. The sound design is equally as impressive. The environmental sounds like the rustling of leaves, the flow of water, or the chirping of birds really help immerse you in this game's world. The rock creatures also have their own set of adorable sounds that make them even more endearing. Voice acting, which is genuinely good, is slightly hit or miss. Some characters do deliver their lines with the right amount of emotion and nuance, whilst others can sound a bit flat and uninspired. This inconsistency doesn't detract much from the overall experience, but it's certainly worth mentioning. So, is Kenna Bridge of Spirits still worth playing on Xbox? Absolutely, especially if you're a fan of action-adventure games with a strong emphasis on storytelling and exploration. It's a game that doesn't necessarily break new ground, but what it does very well. The gorgeous visuals, touching story, and solid gameplay make it a title that's easy to recommend even if it comes with a few flaws. Us here at Xbox Nation give Kenna Bridge of Spirits an 8.5 out of 10. If you're looking for a game that will challenge you with deep mechanics and innovative design, Kenna might not be the best fit. But if you're in a mood for a heartfelt adventure in a beautifully crafted world, this game is definitely worth your time. The issues with movement and performance are minor in the grand scheme of things, and the overall experience is one that's both memorable and enjoyable. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this review, don't forget to hit that like button, drop a comment below about your thoughts on Kenna Bridge of Spirits, and subscribe to the channel for more in-depth Xbox gaming reviews coming to you every week. Whilst here, why don't you check out our video on screen now of the 20 incredible single-player games that you can play on Xbox and Xbox Game Pass in 2024.